Yeah, I think, you try to use as much information as you possibly can, but ultimately it comes down to a call. But the more you've got, the more information you have, and the more you can try to understand and predict macro trends, what's happening with the customers. There was enough data. The calls that maybe Alan made, he had some data to make that call. So I think there's always going to be that. I just don't think it's just come down to gut feel. What we try to do is predict with the customers some of the bigger trends. We know some of the bigger macro trends. We know some of the market trends. We know that Asia is going to present X number of opportunities. So you take all that information and then ultimately that you've got to make the call. But for me, it still comes down to understanding, as much as we possibly can about where it's going.
We took the decision on, about the to slam on the brakes that I described. That was totally on the basis of the credit markets closing down in September that we saw, and we read that as being a sign of things to come. And here later, Lehman's goes bust, and everybody knows the rest. But coming back to the sort of gut feel question, the biggest area I have taken decisions on, looking back over the last few years, was international expansion. And I'm still kind of thinking, was that the right decision or not? I hope that in 10 years' time, people will, who was that guy that went into China? And they might remember me. But at the moment, all you do is lose money. And the biggest, if we wanted to really kind of maximize short-term profitability, we would not have gone into major overseas markets because it's tough. And you do spend a lot of time in research and development of the market, and you spend a lot of time trying to understand where the best sites are. Last time I looked, we had just under 100 stores in China. We've probably closed 30 since we started there because we got the site profiles wrong. So coming back to the gut feel, that was an instinct that you think, tomorrow is going to be the Far East and China in particular, maybe India. And I hope that gut feel decision is borne out in due course.
The data, you're absolutely right. There are no future data points. There are guesses and forecasts and estimates and things like that. And I've had... it's quite interesting, actually. We did a program not so long back when I looked at 3 sets of forecasts and looked remarkably similar. And then I found out that 2 others had worked off the first one to actually produce market data, which I thought was an insight when it was challenged. But your point was that most people's models were wrong. We found that most people modelled last year for this year, and their data was based on historic data, and so therefore they were trying to extrapolate from last year, trying to somehow take the rear vision mirror and point it forward. The second thing is they did it in October or September or July, and weren't actually monitoring and updating the data. So the point about strategy is it's only as good as the information and the experience and the capability of the manager. However, the Jensen Button example is he didn't get the briefing 2 years before he got in the car. He's actually having the data updated as he goes. And I think you need a system to enable the information to be presented in a way that management can understand. And the balanced scorecard is one example of that. But the scorecard typically is about your company and some market data. But to have that data updated, trends in the data, trends from social networking, trends from business sites, trends from market analysis, so that people are getting updated, is what it's about. You can only work on what you expect and then judging it against that and then doing the strategy on that. But we found when we looked at that exact point that most people, and IBM is no different in a way in some of its big planning exercises. We did our 2011 plan in September 2010. We had a whole bunch of models. We go through pain and anguish to get our budgets together and forecasts. We have thousands of pages of data. We then get to January, we got new data, and we have to be able to synthesise that as a team. And when I said that my team is not IBM, it's a part of IBM. It needs to operate in a different way. We operate off much more localised data, and we're using much more effective data, in my view, because I'm not relying on the annual budget cycle and last year's models and the growth potential in the forecast from July 2010, because it's not very useful.